and today, and that means that we bring in Jarrett and Bart to wrap up the show for another week. What's the mug, Bart?
It's Good Morning Baltimore because we're fighting homophobia, racism, and misogyny this morning.
Excellent. All right. So
got that at the when I went to go see Hairspray 2 weeks ago. So.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Got to go see Hairspray. It was on different nights, but you got to go see Hairspray 2 weeks ago. All right. So from 30,000 feet, Bart, I'll start with you now that you got your nap in after late night television. 3-0, but there's a lot of other subplots. What sticks in your mind?
Listen, the 3-0 and the way that game played out is, I think, indicative of where these two programs are at this point in time. We had I think it was a Gold Cup final in 2011. Maybe it was 9, but I'm pretty sure it's 2011, where Mexico thrashed us. And it was a very good kind of benchmark of where the two programs were at that time, kind of continued even farther into that in 2015 when we didn't even make the Gold Cup final. But this was a good representation of where these two teams are right now. And you saw the lineups come out and you went, oh crap, we're actually the better, more talented team. And that has really never happened against Mexico until very, very recently. That performance last night was dominant from the U.S., despite the fact that, we didn't necessarily control possession, but we did control the actual action on the field. We won more duels. We actually had more they had like double our pass numbers, but we had more passes in their attacking and their defending half than they had in ours. Obviously, the 3 goals were very well worked goals. Maybe the first one a little lucky, but the second 2 were just exploiting their defense for being not very good. And then you add to the fact that Mexico and their fans, more importantly, reacted so poorly to the fact that they are just washed. And it's just the realization that they all know that they're just a bunch of trash people in that stadium, throwing trash on the field and making trash and homophobic chants to the point where the referee just said, screw it, we're done.
Yeah, well, we got into that, and I still believe that Ivan Barton has no business calling a match.
He had a very bad match, and we can talk about that as a referee.
Oh, no doubt. We will talk referee here. And Jarrett Smith from 30,000 feet, now that you've had your nap.
Look, I mean, it's a 3-0 win that frankly could have been worse. That is, it's kind of a weird one because I feel like people really didn't enjoy it because of the Berhalter news and because of all of the background that comes with that. And I kind of feel like we, collectively, the royal we, didn't enjoy the fact that Mexico is going in a very negative direction right now. Your biggest rival is an absolute mess. If the manager had gotten fired before he got on, if the manager had gotten fired before he walked off the field, I wouldn't have been surprised.
No, I thought he would have been Kiffin last night. Yeah.
Yeah. As far as the officiating, look, the fact that he put 12 minutes on the board is unacceptable. That game had boiled over to the point that it was cooked. At 90 minutes, that game was done. Mexico had nothing to offer you other than starting fights, and it was 3-0. I don't really care how much stoppage there was in the second half. You should have ended the game at 90 minutes on the dot. And and when you do your referee report afterward and they ask, why'd you stop it at 90? Because it was boiling over and the game was done. We needed to get everyone out of there safely.
Yeah, I'd rather them say, oh, we're going to do 2 minutes of stoppage and do 2 minutes to be done, right, than the 12 minutes and stop at 7, because I'm with you, Jarrett. Like, I think the referee report could have very easily been like, as the manager of this match, it was to the point where it would have been harmful to more players to continue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, as it went on, I kept, you get desks eventually sent off, and I kept thinking, like, this is just going to boil over, and we're going to have even more problems. You know who enjoyed that is Canada.
Yeah.
Because Canada got to have a pretty fun 2-0 victory over Panama. Canada, who, by the way, is now your biggest rivalry in CONCACAF. Mexico, you had my rivalry with Mexico has been ended. Canada is now my rival. But
they're almost as fun to hate because they think they're so darn nice.
Just ask John Hurt.
And they're not. John
Herdman's obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this yesterday, that like Canada tried 3 different identities at the World Cup and none of them worked, and they made more press for running their mouths, for Herdman running his mouth, than they did for their play on the field. Low key, a fun game to watch is going to be the third place game, because after what the USA did to Mexico, you don't think Panama's watching that thinking, oh, we're going to crawl all the way inside of Mexico's head. We're going to make this a psychological warfare, and we are going to torment the bullies of CONCACAF in a way that the United States has never dreamt of.
Yeah, we'll see what Panama can do. I thought they were pretty decent against Canada, but a lot of action with no real end product. Whereas Canada is only end product. They don't have any action before that. So that played out perfectly for Canada, that match. But yeah, Jared, it was weird to see the U.S. bullying Mexico on the field to the point where Mexico's only option was to start kicking and elbowing and punching players, because they knew they'd get away with it, because CONCACAF referees continually protect Mexican players for when they do that crap. In that entire melee, that West gets a red card, which I don't have a problem with. Like, look, both red cards we got, it's hard to really get. It's hard to get too upset that we also got a red card. But how was West the only person who came out of that melee with a red card?
Mm-hmm.
The entire half the Mexican bench is up there grabbing and pushing him and trying to do it to other team players. And VAR looked at it and said, no, just West. That is shameful from the entire referee crew. It's shameful from CONCACAF. The referee absolutely lost control of that match. And it started when Acuna should have been given a second yellow card for putting a shoulder into Gio Reyna's face. That would have been targeting in many SEC schools games. Like, seriously. And
Smoke Monday's got issues with Arteaga.
Like, I know it's not leading with the head, but he that was targeting, right? And that at that point, he gave a signal to Mexico. It's fine. It's fine. Y'all can be trashy classless players like you always have been, but now you just suck. So it doesn't really make up for it. Sorry, I'm not holding back on Mexico, because they were a terrible display of what the sport should be last night. They offered us the absolute worst of both sportsmanship, fan involvement, and just general play.
Mm-hmm.
They don't deserve any praise. They don't deserve any benefit of the doubt. They were it was so I don't know how a Mexican fan could not be embarrassed by how they performed last night on and off the field. I'm sorry. It was absolutely shameful.
Yeah. And so then let me ask you this. I mean, we've kind of gotten into reffing down here and how Ivan Barton has no business being a center ref in the future for anything of that import. With fans throwing stuff on the field, I don't care if you were throwing it at the Mexican players, if you were a U.S. fan of Serginho Dest getting shoved in the head twice, if you're a U.S. fan and you threw something at that gaggle, or if you were an El Tree fan throwing something at and the players there, I don't care. Find out who you are. You're done. You're not coming to another match, and whatever facial recognition technology we have, we'll figure it out.
There has to be actual sanctions against the Mexican team and their federation. And as I tweeted last night, slightly in a inebriated state of anger. There has to be actual sanctions against Mexico, because clearly the threat of not having matches or fans at their matches didn't work. I tell you one that they should do, and this is something that U.S. Soccer maybe can do, is don't allow Mexico, and FIFA maybe has to step in. Mexico cannot host matches in the U.S. anymore, at least for a given period of time. Obviously, it's kind of hard to do stuff for the Gold Cup when it comes to fans, because those are neutral site. I get that. Yeah. But I would very much say, Mexico, you don't get to host matches in the U.S. because you know where all of their money comes from? Those matches. Mm-hmm. So that would be a sanction I would do. I would even go so far as to investigate pulling their World Cup hosting rights. But, Qatar got to host. So if you're going to let Qatar host, then I don't know how you would take that away from Mexico. But yeah, there needs to be actual sanctions that will actually hurt them and punish the fans. And I think that's where we get to, is not being able to host in the U.S. would punish both the federation financially and the fans, because they wouldn't be able to watch their team and act like fools throughout the entire match.
And you pay.
It started in the 13th minute, John.
Yeah, it did.
13th minute.
Yeah, I know. And it was 5 warnings to go through 3 steps.
Yeah.
Katie, we all have doppelgangers. Katie, I know that you have one yourself. It was not Gianni Infantino in the suit that was pushing West toward the locker room after the melee. It was a doppelganger. I don't know who it was, but it did look a lot like Gianni Infantino. I would, and we've talked about it this morning on the show. Some of the other folks in Twitch Pitch have said, okay, yeah, you don't host. It's made as difficult as possible for your team to play in an opposing venue, and you also pay the operating costs in the away venue for your team to get there. In Canada, and they play at the Halifax Wanderers Stadium. You're paying for the operating costs for that match under normal circumstances. You're paying the freight for that match to happen. None of your fans are allowed in it. None of your fans are allowed to buy tickets from outside the country that is hosting that particular match. Something like that. Just thinking out loud. And then David will deduct points for World Cup qualifying. Oh, wait. Yeah, so we've got that too.
Well, I think they considered that maybe going into the 2021-22 cycle. I know they had to play some games behind closed doors, reportedly. But yeah, I mean, again, clearly the procedures aren't working. The warnings aren't working. And at this point, it seems like they're weaponizing that. Sorry to steal a hot term from politics right now. But they're weaponizing that to affect the match, and clearly that was their goal last night. Because I mean, that one right before the 90th minute was the loudest that it has ever heard, like coming across the television. You know,
it was. I mean, Jared's point now is so pissed off that they are.
I didn't read the FCC warning today.
No, you didn't. No, pissed off is not. Pissed off is fine.
We're fine. It's
literally it's using that chant, capital T, capital C, to hurt their own team. Now that's where the El Tri fans are as a.
They're. It's a pathetic. We're gonna take our ball and go home kind of thing, you know. And it's not okay on multiple fronts, but it's just it's such like we don't like the way this is going, so we're gonna be done kind of nonsense. And it's just, the whole thing's pathetic. It took away from what was a really fun. It did take away, and you can call it dramatic if you want to, but look, people are impacted by this. There's a reason you have the rule in place. CONCACAF put the rule. They might not enforce it. CONCACAF might be all bargain, no bite, but people do have emotions about it. People do care, because they should. But the fact that Mexico's fans, more specifically, in a large group, decide that they want to take their ball and go home, they shouldn't have that opportunity. Play it behind closed doors for this next one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, actually, you know what? No. For the third place game, play it as normal. But when we get into the octagonal, start playing their games behind closed doors in Mexico.
Well, but I was thinking that through, and do you not create the possibility of a security issue outside the stadium with fans wanting to either charge the gates or yell or do whatever outside the stadium, creating something outside the stadium instead of inside? That's why I said everything's on the road.
But here's the thing,
we don't
man.
have qualifying coming up, though, is the problem.
But
there's no meaningful matches for Mexico until the World Cup in 2026. So, is the option we don't let them participate in Copa America? I don't think that's going to happen. Because
you cannot sit here and use the fear of that sort of thing to decide not to sanction somebody. That's bullshit.
I agree, but CONCACAF, they continually protect, and the U.S. is beneficiary of this as well. They continually protect their big dogs, But there is a lot of there are so many other good things from the U.S. last night.
Like what?
Well, Christian Pulisic scored twice after Mexico fans told us that he was washed, terrible, not very good, doesn't belong in the Prem. Scored twice on Mexico. Ricardo Pepi, the guy who chose the U.S. over Mexico, scored on Mexico.
Got that Cruton.
We got another clean sheet. That was you know what, Jared? It was great because I forget if it was who it was. Maybe it was Martin in the first half, I think. No, it was the second half, but had a very similar play where he could have dribbled around Turner and after a bad giveaway, could have dribbled around Turner and maybe done similarly to Pepi, and he did not. And Pepi was just cool as a cucumber, able to do that. It was such a dominant performance. And again, I know Mexico did have more possession at the end of the day because, they had to. But the U.S. conceded 0 goals again. And really, Matt Turner never really having to make what I felt was like a hero save. Granted, I don't think Memo had to either, mainly because we scored 3 goals and, he didn't have a chance to. Miles Robinson now apparently is at 380 minutes against Mexico in total and has conceded 0 goals. But, Jared, I've been told he's not good enough because he plays in MLS. And Atlanta United has held him back. But that is a positive. Chris Richards and Miles Robinson, watching them play center back together was fantastic. Serginho Dest, who, by the way, throughout the game, a lot of times I thought Gio Reyna was Serginho Dest because of the hair color. I'm not used to Gio having the platinum blonde, but hey, it worked because Gio was also on a heater last night. It just didn't come off every time. But Dest was, man, Serginho Dest can come through and really show his class when it comes to a big game for the U.S. I thought even, to an extent, Flo was really good. I just don't think you can't prepare. No amount of telling someone for what was going to happen last night could have prepared him for what happened last night, Jared. It was like, you could have been like, okay, Flo, they're going to kick you every time they get an opportunity and they're going to get away with it. He'll go, okay, yeah. Not realizing that they will literally kick you every opportunity they get and get away with it. And then just the brawls that we had. There's no way that any amount of storytelling could have prepared Flo for what happened last night. But it's good he got that taste. I hate for the guy that his first appearance for the U.S. was that match.
Yeah, it was chaotic. It's your first match, and you survived it. At the end of the day, all this nonsense takes away from the fact that USA had call it a comfortable game against Mexico.
Yeah.
Because holy hell, we're not used to that. We've never been used to that. For good reason.
It was, I think for me personally, I had my general, usual pre-Mexico jitters of oh my gosh, this game is going to be tough. And this is going to be really a battle and all these things. Once the game kicked off, I was like, oh, we're better. like everywhere. Debatably, maybe not better at goalkeeper. I will still give Memo Ochoa a whole lot of praise because he deserves it. But Matt Turner is a fantastic goalkeeper in his own right.
Just doing the job, man.
Yeah. Center backs, clearly better. Clearly better at winger. The midfield was so much better than their midfield, which when's the last time we could have ever said that about a USA-Mexico game?
Yep.
And it just, again, it is – we can talk very briefly about the other news of last night, but I think the best thing right now is that this group of players who have had since 2019, really more like 2021, but like since 2019, we've been building toward the 2026 opportunity, right? With trying to get these young, incredible players to play together, grow together. And now they're moving into the primes of their careers. And as a unit, they're so comfortable with each other, confident in one another. And this is not in support of necessarily the breaking news from last night, but it is a testament to the culture and the camaraderie that has been built in that program, in that team, by the guy who will now be rehired as head coach of the U.S. men's national team.
Yeah. So we'll have all of that to look forward to. So does this mean that there's going to be a special Soccer for US POD?
We'll have to see what our availability is because the weekend is coming up, right? So watch this happen at Friday, today at noon. Be a slight news dump. I think
soccer does such a good job of setting their own people up for criticism. Like, you have a manager who you're going to rehire, who I think was fine, and I would love to know who were the other finalists. But he's contentious. Everything about it is tense. And you pick right before a U.S.-Mexico game to drop the news. You do nothing to help him because
it's probably because they really thought that it was the best time to distract everyone. Like, I would have rather them come out with it this morning to we're already in a good mood. Fine.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's perfect. Or and if you had won the game, come out with it this morning. If you had lost the game, I don't know, come out with it next week.
Or come out with it this morning and be like, hey, look, we got to do this. I don't know, but it was. I think what bothers me most, Jared,
federation.
is, why hire Sportsology to take 6 months to bring you back to the same place you were? Why go through the feint? I guess in my opinion, after the investigation concluded of what happened, it very well could have just been like, hey, you know what? We still feel like Greg Berhalter is the best option. Make it very clear he will be part of that process of being interviewed. But I think the problem now is you have a coach who has admitted to committing some sort of domestic harassment, abuse, battery, which word you want to use for it. Granted, we need to realize that has been resolved by he and his wife, and there has clearly been steps to fix and amend and prevent that from happening again. So, but still, it's out there. You have a coach who had open problems with a player's parents. Now, again, I don't think that Greg mishandled the Gio situation at all until when he started talking about it after the World Cup. I think that was where I do not disagree with what he did, especially because it's not like Gio deserved that at all. But at the same time, you have a guy who multiple players over the past 6 months have said they respected him, they liked him, several of them saying they would want him back. I mean, I even listened to Scuff do an interview with Luca De La Torre yesterday, and Luca praised Greg. It wasn't he didn't say he wants him back, but he was like, he admitted that he did a good job. He said he did a good job building a culture and a chemistry within the group. And I do think that is very important at the national team level. I need Greg to improve upon his rigid tactics because, as we have seen since Greg left, we have basically played a double pivot and looked very good in that. So Greg needs to take note of that because that man was married to the 4-1-2-3. And that, for better or worse, was how he played. He does need to learn to be less rigid with his tactics. The philosophy is fine. Clearly the culture is fine, but he has to make changes. I do also want to talk real quick about the absolutely moronic notion that equal pay had something to do with this. Vlatko Andonovski made less than $500,000 last year. Greg Berhalter made $1.8 million. That's 3 times. Whereas, like, even if you're comparing like market price, that's not equitable in any way, shape, or form. So let's not talk about equity and equal pay as the reason. The reality is U.S. Soccer has never paid a head coach for their men's team more than $3.5 million. And that one was when Jurgen Klinsmann was also your technical director. I don't think people understand 2 things. And this is just the reason why I think Greg ultimately was picked. One, there are budgetary restraints in U.S. soccer. There are anywhere in international soccer. Hansi Flick was the highest paid last World Cup, and he only made like $7 million, which is laughable for most decent club coaches, right? Patrick Vieira at Crystal Palace made $4 million, which would have been a big stretch for U.S. soccer to have to pay per year for that guy. Now, granted, you could work in you're not working every day the same way. Like we're going to give you 2.5 or something like that. There's ways to negotiate, but once you start doing that, you're going to lose the interest of a guy who probably could go get a club job somewhere and make $3 to $5 million. So, and we talked about this on the podcast this previous week. There was just a limit that U.S. soccer could pay. People don't want to admit that. For some reason, they think we have $20 million to go get Pep. This is not Texas A&M. We don't have that. Okay? Sorry. There are ways to get money, but we ain't got Texas A&M money. We ain't got UGA money for all intents and purposes, So you have to approach this with some sort of level-headedness and understand that there are limitations on the job search. That said, I do think that we could have tried to find a better coach than Greg Berhalter because I do think that he has obvious issues, but here we are.
And on that, kicking us out of the cabin. Yes, they're kicking us out of the cabin. I know we need to have this conversation. We need to have like a full hour with it when we come back during the international window and just have Bart get in trouble with his real world job and make sure that we can have this discussion on a longer scale. So that's going to do it for another week. Jarrett, it's your turn to send us home because Bart did it last. I always do it when neither of you are on. So go ahead and send us home for another week.
All right, fine. Mucha plot to y'all.
Wow, that was enthusiastic. That's the end of the week.
Look, the last 24 hours have been a pain in my ass.
Yes. And
go watch the Ashes with me and Bam.
There you go. So go watch the Ashes. Atlanta United 2 soccer on Sunday at 6:45, Toronto FC 2, and we'll rock and roll from there. So we got stuff coming up. We got stuff that's going on the network all over the place. Once again, thanks for another week. Everybody be safe. We're out the door. Bye.